Hey, what's up, Liron here. One thing I wanted to do for a while is go a little more basic. It's been a while since I did something more for beginners, so we're gonna paint very loose flowers. And I have a picture up on the screen, but don't even think of it as any harsh reference photo. What I was trying to do is just have something visually to refer to if I want to figure out the shapes of some of the petals. What I want to share with you here, and this is probably something I'll do for the entire week, I'll go more basic and loose. I want to show you what's very common in watercolor painting and how I paint. And that is a process from going from wet to dry. It's something I talk about sometimes, often, depending on how I phrase it, not exactly in that way, but the idea is the wetter the wash is, you have more time to paint, right? So what I like to do is start quite wet, and while it's drying, I'm gonna add more details to it. So what you're seeing here is I just pre-wet the paper and I put in a bunch of circles here, and I just vary them up using my red and yellow and an orange in between. Feel free to just pre-wet the paper very loosely and then go ahead and do these circles in. The next step to me is to try and establish overall shadows, meaning I'm going to try and get the areas of the flowers that are more hidden, more obscure from the light, get them a little bit darker. It depends on what you have on paper, of course. If you put a very thin wash, you just need a little paint to push it to be a little darker. And there is a bit of confusion with watercolor painting in that, yes, things look strong on the palette. Once they go on paper, they dry lighter, and the worst part of that is if the paper is already wet to begin with, it's gonna dry much lighter. So you almost have to always account for that. The way to master it, quote unquote, is to get that feedback loop going. Do it, realize you were wrong. Do it again, realize you were wrong, and so on and so forth, and then adjust, make the tweaks necessary. Now I'm sprucing it up with a bit of greens in between. So I have this beautiful, very bright green actually. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm mixing it with red because they're opposite on the color wheel. They neutralize each other really, really well. And I do this to add some interest of temperature to the painting and to show those gaps in between the flowers where some of those leaves or whatever it is showing, right? I'm softening the edges. That's just my choice. I could have gone for also a background that I'll make darker, making the flowers pop a bit. I don't even do that here. I wanted to keep this fairly loose. But what I am doing is just lifting a bit. So if you want to take what you have, a mid value or a light value, and push it to be lighter and darker at the same time, you can lift with a damp or a wet or a dry brush, and then you can charge with a bit of darker paint. So what you're doing when you're lifting like this, you're drying the brush as much as possible and touching the paper. You can start creating interesting patterns that will work well with the wet and wet darkening that we're gonna do right now. So it's a very interesting process that's quite straightforward. I'm using this way of painting in almost everything I do. It's my way of playing around with what I have on paper. If I want to push it darker, if I want to push it lighter, and so on, that's usually how I do it, right? Now I have a bit of stronger paint, and you can see by how it moves on the palette. Look at how strong that is. When I do this, you can tell and you can know in advance I want it to last. So I want the paint I'm putting right now to smoothen out and kind of blur out, but just a touch, not too much. Now, if your paper is really wet, using this thick paint won't help. The paint will still spread out, but it's all about the timing. I have a good read on what a good timing is, and so I can recognize when it's the good timing where the paint is like 60% dry, 40% still wet. You can start charging these shapes and get a beautiful spread that isn't too strong. Now what I want to show you is while we're painting this, notice how slowly an impression begins to occur. Without you even noticing, things start to read as something. Now, I'm not even trying to paint what's in the picture. Again, it's just a loose reference to have something to look at, to figure out the shape of the petals and how the light and shadow work. And you can do this with a lot of subjects. I'm going to show you another process, I think on Saturday with a car, that you can open a random reference photo and just use that as the loosest reference possible, just to understand how things work, okay? Because I have no experience with florals, really. It's not my forte, it's not my go-to subject matter. And what I love about painting this way is you're putting your trust almost in watercolor. Not in a way of, you know, you're forcing yourself to trust the process or anything like that. You let watercolor do some of the work for you. You let things spread out for you, right? And the colors I'm using are very odd, right? I would go with a more saturated often color first and then go with a neutral dark. Here I'm going with like this bright red as a dark. I don't know, I just felt like trying to do something different. But notice how the more we add details and shadows, suddenly something appears, some kind of an image appears. And even if you paint and you don't like the result you get, you can almost always find something you like about it. One area where you let the paint do its thing freely. One area where things spread out kind of like you imagined or wanted them to spread out. One area where the impression, it may not look realistic, but it looks kind of cool, right? And when you let watercolor do a lot of the work for you, you can be sure it's going to have some gracefulness to it, which is what I'm attempting to do here, what I'm attempting to show you. I'm going to put in some dark color there right under the lower flowers, just to give it some kind of a shadow, just to anchor it to the ground. And here is the final result. I hope you enjoyed this one. Again, very loose, very fun. You just rewind, it's a short video. Look at what I'm doing. I'm pre-wetting the paper, then I'm putting some round shapes in it, and I'm slowly pushing it to be darker and darker. Play around with it. Start with saturated colors, then move to neutral colors. Start with neutral, then go to saturated. See what works for you, see what creates an impression you like. If you don't see the impression, zoom out a bit or take a break. It will suddenly appear. I hope you enjoyed this one and found it useful. You're gonna have links to all of my courses below if you want to learn how to paint loosely, freely, enjoy the painting process. That's down in the description box. And most importantly, I want to thank everyone who supports me over on Patreon. Really, really appreciate it. If you want credits at the end of the videos, check it out. We'll see you in the next vid. Take care.